When I decided to visit my mom's cousin, I had no idea that this visit would end up changing everything for me. My family has always been a little different, but I had always viewed my mom's cousin as the charismatic, outgoing type. He wasn't one for big family gatherings, but he had a way of making everyone feel at ease. He was kind, sure, but there was something about him that always seemed to draw people in. He had a mysterious aura, a charm that was hard to ignore. I remember the day I arrived perfectly, bright and sunny, the kind of afternoon that seemed to promise everything would be just as it always had been. The house was unusually quiet, though. Usually, there would be a little more noise, some chatter from my aunt or cousin, but this time, it felt different. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. I knocked on the door, and my mom's cousin opened it with a smile, though it seemed strained. His usual warmth was there, but his eyes were clouded, like something was weighing on him. He welcomed me in, and I could tell he was trying to keep up appearances, but there was an unease that hung in the air. "How have you been?" he asked, his voice soft, but with a certain tension I couldn't quite place. "I've been good," I replied, giving him a hug. "How about you? Everything all right?" He smiled again, but didn't answer immediately. It was almost as if he hadn't heard my question, or maybe he didn't want to answer. Instead, he gestured toward the living room. "Come on in. Make yourself comfortable." I sat down, but there was this unspoken thing between us that I couldn't ignore. The house felt unusually still, and my mom's cousin, despite his kind demeanor, felt distant. It was like there was something on his mind that he wasn't sharing, and it left me feeling oddly out of place. The afternoon passed with little conversation. He offered me some tea, and we sat in silence for a while, his eyes occasionally drifting off as if lost in thought. I tried to strike up a conversation, but it was like talking to a brick wall. He wasn't rude, but he was distant in a way that I had never experienced before. It wasn't like him to be so closed off, so I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Later, I went to the bathroom, and on my way back I passed by his study. I noticed the door was slightly open, and for some reason, I felt drawn to it. I wasn't one to pry, but something about the room called to me. I pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the old wooden desk, papers scattered across it, and a small box sitting in the corner. It wasn't unusual to see things left out of place, but this box, it was odd. It looked old, with brass hinges and a small worn-out lock. Curiosity got the best of me. I stepped inside, looking around quickly before my eyes landed on the box. It was too intriguing to ignore. I reached for it, my hands shaking slightly as I unlatched the lock and opened it. Inside were yellowed letters and photographs, many of which were in black and white. I picked up one of the photos, my fingers brushing over the glassy surface. My heart stopped when I recognized the faces. My mom's cousin, but with a woman I had never seen before. There were more photos, many of them with this woman, and all of them were from years ago. She seemed to be very special to him, based on the way he looked at her in the photos. Some of the letters were handwritten, and as I started to read, I realized they were love letters, full of passion and longing, but written in a time long before I had ever known my mom's cousin. There was so much emotion in the words, and I could feel it as I read. I could almost hear his voice in my head as I read them, so full of pain and love. It was clear that this was a chapter of his life he had never shared with anyone, not even with his own family. I continued to read, piecing together fragments of his past that he had kept hidden from everyone. The letters spoke of a love he had once had, a relationship that had ended in heartbreak and regret. The woman in the photographs had been the love of his life, but for reasons unknown to me, they had parted ways. My mind was racing as I closed the box, my heart heavy with this new knowledge. I had never known my mom's cousin as anything other than the charismatic, outgoing man he was. But this was a side of him that no one had ever seen. I felt guilty for invading his privacy, but at the same time, a strange sense of connection stirred inside me. He wasn't just my mom's cousin. He was a man who had loved deeply, who had lived through heartbreak, and who was still carrying the weight of those lost memories. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned to find my mom's cousin standing in the doorway, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. His face softened when he saw what I had found. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if time had stopped, And we were both caught in this strange, vulnerable moment. "You found it, didn't you?" he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. I nodded, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and sympathy. "I didn't want you to find that," he continued, stepping into the room. "There are parts of my past that I've never shared with anyone, and I thought I could keep it that way. But you deserve to know, I guess." I stared at him, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to ask him everything. Why he never talked about her. Why he had never mentioned his past. But I could see the sadness in his eyes. And something inside me told me not to push it. Instead, I just sat there listening. "My life, my choices, they weren't easy," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I loved her, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes, life takes you down a different path, and you're left with nothing but the memories." I felt a lump in my throat as I listened to him. For the first time, I saw him not as my mom's cousin, but as a person who had been through things, who had experienced love and loss in ways I couldn't fully understand. That night, as we sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was different. My mom's cousin was more open than I had ever seen him, and I realized that discovering this part of his life had bridged a gap between us. The mysterious silence I had once felt had turned into understanding, and in a strange way, it had brought us closer. In the days that followed, I visited him more often. Our conversations became deeper, less superficial. We talked about his past, about the things he had kept hidden. I learned that my mom's cousin wasn't just the charismatic man I had always known. He was a person who had lived, who had loved, and who had faced the kind of heartache that most people never talk about. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he began to share more details about his past. He told me about how he had met this woman, how they had fallen in love, and how their relationship had been filled with both joy and turmoil. He spoke of the moments they had shared, the dreams they had built together, and the pain they had both endured when it all fell apart. "She was the one," he said, his voice filled with a mix of nostalgia and regret. "But sometimes, even the strongest love can't overcome the challenges life throws at you. We tried, we really did, but in the end it just wasn't enough." I listened intently, feeling a deep sense of empathy for him. It was as if I was seeing a whole new side of my mom's cousin, a side that was vulnerable and human. He wasn't just the distant, mysterious figure I had always known. He was a man with a heart full of love and pain. As the days turned into weeks, our bond grew stronger. I found myself looking forward to our visits, to the conversations that were filled with both laughter and tears. We shared stories, we laughed at old memories, and we cried over the losses we had both experienced. It was a time of healing for both of us, a time to connect on a deeper level. One day, as we were walking through the park, he turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd be able to share this part of my life with anyone. But you've given me the courage to open up, to face the past and move forward. Thank you for that." I felt a warmth spread through me as I looked at him. It was a moment of pure connection, a moment that would stay with me forever. I realized that this visit, this unexpected journey into my mom's cousin's past, had changed not just him, but me as well. It had taught me the importance of understanding, of empathy, and of the power of shared experiences. As I left his house that day, I knew that our relationship had been forever altered. We were no longer just family. We were friends, confidants, and partners in this journey called life. And as I walked away, I carried with me a newfound appreciation for the complexities of love, loss, and the enduring power of human connection. What I discovered that day was more than just a collection of old photos and letters. It was the key to understanding my mom's cousin in a way that no one else ever had. It was the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one built on honesty and vulnerability. And I knew that, no matter what, this chapter of our lives would never be forgotten. It was a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, we can find the connections that make us who we are. The days turned into weeks, and our bond continued to grow stronger. I found myself visiting my mom's cousin more frequently, each visit revealing more layers of his past and our shared history. One afternoon, as we sat in his study, he pulled out an old photo album, its leather cover worn with age. "There's more to the story," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I want you to see it all." We flipped through the pages, each one filled with memories captured in time. There were photos of him and the mysterious woman, their smiles radiating happiness and love. But there were also pictures of other people, faces I didn't recognize, all part of a past he had kept hidden. Who are these people? I asked, pointing to a group photo taken at what looked like a family gathering. Friends, family, people who were part of our lives back then, he replied, his eyes distant as if lost in the memories. Some of them are no longer with us, but they were important to us at the time. As we continued to look through the album, I noticed a pattern. In many of the photos, there was a recurring figure, a man who always seemed to be in the background, his face partially obscured or turned away from the camera. It was as if he was deliberately avoiding being captured in the frame. Who is that? I asked, pointing to the mysterious figure. My mom's cousin hesitated for a moment, his expression growing serious. That's a story for another time, he said, his voice low. But I promise, I'll tell you everything when the time is right. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something about the way he said it, a hint of mystery and danger that piqued my curiosity even more. I knew there was more to this story, more layers to uncover, and I was determined to find out the truth. Over the next few weeks, our conversations took a darker turn. My mom's cousin began to share stories of his past that were filled with intrigue and danger. He spoke of secrets kept hidden for years, of betrayals and heartaches that had shaped his life in ways I could barely comprehend. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, he told me about a time when he had been involved in something dangerous, something that had put his life and the lives of those he loved in jeopardy. He spoke of a group of people, a secret society of sorts, who had been after something he possessed, a valuable artifact that held immense power. I never wanted any of this, he said, his voice filled with regret. But sometimes life doesn't give you a choice. You have to do what you have to do to protect the ones you love. I listened intently, my heart racing as he revealed more details about this secret society and their relentless pursuit of the artifact. He spoke of close calls, of narrow escapes, and of the constant fear that had become a part of his life. But why didn't you just give it to them? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because it wasn't just about the artifact, he replied, his eyes filled with a determination I had never seen before. It was about the principle, about standing up for what was right, even when everything seemed stacked against you. As the days turned into weeks, our conversations became more intense, more revealing. I learned about the sacrifices he had made, the risks he had taken, all in the name of love and loyalty. And as I listened to his stories, I began to see him in a new light. Not just as my mom's cousin, but as a hero, a man who had faced incredible odds and emerged stronger for it. One day, as we sat in his study, he pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was different from the one I had found earlier, more ornate and clearly very old. He opened it carefully, revealing a beautifully crafted pendant, its gemstone glinting in the soft light of the room. This is what they were after, he said, his voice filled with a mix of pride and sadness. It's been in our family for generations, passed down from one keeper to the next. And now it's time for me to pass it on to you. I stared at the pendant, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, what I was seeing. This was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a legacy, of a history that was both beautiful and dangerous. But why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because you're the only one I trust with this, he replied, his eyes filled with a deep sense of trust and love. You're the only one who understands, who sees the truth behind the stories, who knows the importance of keeping this safe. As he placed the pendant in my hands, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders, a responsibility that was both daunting and exhilarating. I knew that this was a turning point, a moment that would change everything. In the days that followed, I began to understand the true magnitude of what I had been entrusted with. The pendant was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a key to a world I had never known existed, a world filled with secrets and mysteries, with dangers and adventures. I started to delve deeper into the history of the pendant, into the stories of the keepers who had come before me. I learned about their struggles, their triumphs, and their sacrifices. And as I did, I began to see my own role in this legacy more clearly. I was not just a keeper. I was a guardian, a protector of something far greater than myself. One evening, As I sat alone in my room, studying the pendant and the stories that came with it, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. It was as if a presence had entered the room, a presence that was both familiar and unsettling. I turned to see my mom's cousin standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and concern. "You're ready," he said, his voice filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. "You're ready to take on the mantle, to carry on the legacy." I nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. I knew that this was a journey that would test me, that would push me to my limits. But I also knew that it was a journey I was meant to take, a path I was destined to follow. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to prepare for the journey ahead. I studied the stories of the keepers, learned the secrets of the pendant, and trained myself to face the challenges that lay ahead. And as I did, I felt a growing sense of purpose, a deepening connection to the legacy I had been entrusted with. One day, as I sat in my room, packing my bags for the journey ahead, I felt a sudden sense of calm wash over me. It was as if all the pieces had finally fallen into place, as if everything I had been through, everything I had learned, had led me to this moment. I looked at the pendant, its gemstone glinting in the soft light of the room, and I knew that this was just the beginning. This was the start of a new chapter, a new adventure, a new journey into the unknown. And as I stepped out of my room, ready to face whatever lay ahead, I knew that I was not alone. I had the strength of the keepers who had come before me, the love and support of my family, and the unwavering belief in myself. As I embarked on my journey, I began to realize that the dangers I faced were not just physical. They were emotional, psychological, and spiritual. The secret society that had pursued my mom's cousin was still out there, still searching for the pendant, still willing to do whatever it took to get their hands on it. One evening, as I sat in a small cafe in a quiet town, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. It was as if a shadow had fallen over me, a presence that was both familiar and terrifying. I turned to see a man standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I recognized him instantly. He was the man from the photos, the mysterious figure who had always seemed to be in the background, his face partially obscured or turned away from the camera. And now, he was here, standing before me, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and malice. "You have something that belongs to us," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "And we want it back." I felt a surge of fear and anger rise within me. I knew that this was a moment I had been preparing for, a confrontation I had been expecting. And as I looked into the eyes of this man, I knew that I had to stand my ground, that I had to protect the pendant and the legacy it represented. The days that followed were a blur of tension and anticipation. I knew that the man from the cafe was not alone, that he was part of a larger organization, a secret society that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And I knew that I had to be ready, that I had to be prepared for whatever they threw at me. One evening, as I sat in my hotel room, going over the stories of the keepers and the secrets of the pendant, I heard a soft knock at the door. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, before opening the door to find my mom's cousin standing there, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and determination. "I knew they would come for you," he said, his voice filled with a deep sense of regret. "I knew they would never give up." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I looked at him, knowing that I was not alone, that I had someone who understood, someone who had been through this before. And as we sat together, planning our next move, I felt a growing sense of resolve, a deepening commitment to the legacy I had been entrusted with. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, as we prepared for the final confrontation. We knew that the secret society would not give up, that they would continue to pursue us, to hunt us down, until they got what they wanted. And we knew that we had to be ready, that we had to be prepared for the battle ahead. One evening, as we sat in a small, secluded cabin, surrounded by the beauty of nature, we felt a sudden chill run down our spines. It was as if a shadow had fallen over us, a presence that was both familiar and terrifying. We turned to see the man from the cafe standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and malice. "You can't run forever," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "We will find you, and we will take what is rightfully ours." I felt a surge of fear and anger rise within me. I knew that this was the moment we had been preparing for. The final battle that would determine the fate of the pendant and the legacy it represented. And as I looked into the eyes of this man, I knew that I had to stand my ground, that I had to protect what had been entrusted to me. The battle that followed was intense and brutal, a test of our strength, our courage, and our resolve. We fought with everything we had, using all the knowledge and skills we had acquired, all the lessons we had learned from the keepers who had come before us. And as we fought, we knew that we were not just fighting for ourselves, but for the legacy, for the history, for the future. In the end, we emerged victorious, the secret society defeated, their plans foiled, their pursuit of the pendant ended. And as we stood there, exhausted but triumphant, we knew that we had done what we had set out to do, that we had protected the legacy and ensured its continuation. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, we began to heal, to recover, to rebuild. We knew that the battle was over, that the danger had passed, but we also knew that the journey was far from over. There were still secrets to uncover, still mysteries to solve, still adventures to be had. And as we looked to the future, we knew that we were not alone, that we had each other, that we had the strength of the keepers who had come before us, the love and support of our family, and the unwavering belief in ourselves. We knew that whatever lay ahead, we were ready, that we were prepared, that we were destined for greatness. What I discovered that day was more than just a collection of old photos and letters. It was the key to understanding my mom's cousin in a way that no one else ever had. It was the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one built on honesty and vulnerability. And I knew that, no matter what, this chapter of our lives would never be forgotten. It was a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, we can find the connections that make us who we are.